Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's webinar, Where is Siri for the Enterprise? Brought to you by Enterprise Connect, AVST, and United Business Media, LLC. I'm Eric Kraft, co-chair of Enterprise Connect and editor of NoJitter.com, and I'm your moderator today. We have just a few announcements before we begin. This webinar is designed to be interactive between you and the presenters. Later in the program, we'll ask for your feedback. This webinar event contains audience polling. The polling questions will appear in the presentation window. Please complete the poll when it appears. Thanks in advance for your participation. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the presentation. Just type your question into the Ask a Question text area below the media player, then click the Submit button. We'll answer as many questions as time permits after the presentation. The slides will advance automatically through the event. You may also download a copy of the slides by clicking on the Download Slide button located below the presentation window. At this time, we recommend you disable your pop-up blockers. If you're experiencing any technical problems, please visit our webinar help guide by clicking on the Help link below the video window. In addition, you can contact our technical support helpline, which is also located in the webinar help guide. If you're having problems with slides advancing, press your F5 key to refresh your console. Now, on to the presentation, Where is Siri for the Enterprise? Discussing today's webcast will be Michael Finneran, Principal, DBRN Associates, and Hardy Myers, President and CEO of AVST. And they're going to be talking together and interactively on what I think is going to be a really interesting look at how you can use some of the new applications and new capabilities around mobility to improve your enterprise's business processes. So welcome, Michael and Hardy, and take it away.
Thank you. If you go to slide 2, please. Well, first of all, I want to thank all of you for taking the time to attend the webinar. As Eric mentioned, AVST is sponsoring the webinar. We're specialists in enterprise class unified communications. We're focused in 3 core areas with best-of-breed solutions: mobility, voice, and business process. We are known for our interoperability, and we have the broadest interoperability of any firm in the UC market. Over 10,000 customers worldwide, celebrating our 30-year anniversary this year, and really maintaining and staying focused to our mission, which is to transform enterprise productivity through enhanced or unified communications. Next slide, please. This gives you just a quick snapshot of the, as I mentioned, the 4 core areas of the UC stack that we're focused in. UC voice being some of the more traditional applications that we are known for, and of course really moving into our latest and greatest tech capabilities in the UC mobile space and the UC business process space. Interoperability, of course, covers both the telephony side as well as the, if you will, collaboration software groupware side, and also into the databases of the enterprise. Michael, did you want to add any comment on this one?
Just a note on interoperability, Hardy. Interop has been one of the key difficulties that we've faced in UC. So the ability for the platform, your platform, to work across the various UC implementations is really going to be key. And well, I'm looking forward to talking about Atom. I've been watching it for a while now.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next slide, please. So what I thought I would do is just cover some high-level terms, and then Michael and I are going to talk about each one of these in more detail for you, to set the stage for this idea about enterprise class personal assistant or mobile personal assistant. So 3 key trends that we see that we're very focused on and that we think you should be focused on. Of course, mobility. Michael's going to spend quite a bit of time talking about that, but as we all know, mobility is fundamentally transforming how we do business. 3 key takeaways here. Obviously, usability is critical, simplicity being the prime directive. You want to be deploying mobile-based solutions to accelerate, to create positive disruption in your business, and really everyone is pushing to see how they can deploy mobile solutions quicker. And then, of course, the key point here is, and I'm sure Michael would concur, is that line of business managers, and we've seen this with the whole explosion of BYOD, they're not going to wait for us to have fully formed corporate-wide mobile roadmaps. So it's critical that you get in front of it as the IT team and make sure that you're supporting your line of business managers' needs in a real-time basis. On the cloud side, from our perspective, we really see hybrid as being where the action is in enterprise. I would argue that really 2012 was the birth of hybrid in the context of it really hitting with a big splash. And Michael's going to show you some statistics from a recent survey he did in January relative to not only where enterprises' minds are at relative to hybrid today, but where they're going in the future. And this is a very important trend that you want to pay attention to. But it's this concept of combining premise or private cloud-based IT assets with multiple cloud-based services, creating a hybrid cloud-type scenario. And I'm going to show you in the cloud section an example of what it might look like in your enterprise. And then one that's really important and I'd say near and dear to our heart, and I'm sure Michael would concur as well, is context. And context is this idea, and this is a very hot term, if you will. It's, again, on the consumer side, it's been pretty prevalent now for several years, this idea of leveraging the knowledge of a user's location, preferences, availability, or what device or what information they want to transform, frankly, the utility of any application, but in the context of UC, to transform the utility of UC applications.
You know, it's funny you mentioned BYOD. I just got the results for the Information Week survey on mobile security that we run every year, and 88% of the respondents either had a BYOD policy or developing one. So
interesting.
It's never, I don't think it's ever going to be 100, but it's getting darn close.
Yep. Well, mobility is clearly the mega trend in this conversation. So, next slide, please. But you know, taking this back to sort of ground, right down to the base here. You know, at the end of the day, what is the goal of what we're doing? And the goal of unified communications, or whatever you want to call it, is simply stated to cost-effectively improve productivity through enhanced or unified communications. And we at AVST spend a lot of time viewing this, and would suggest that you do as well. And I think you do, thinking about it in three different contexts. No pun intended. One being individual productivity, which is really the core of what we're going to talk about today. The second being around work group productivity, and the third being enterprise productivity. And so that's the sort of the various elements we focus on at AVST. But today, the primary focus will be all around individual and user productivity. Next slide, please. So, Michael, do you want to pick up here on mobility?
Yes, I would, Hardy. Thank you. Eric, if you'd advance one for us here. Certainly the world is becoming more mobile, and more mobile means more choice. We've had an absolute explosion of devices. When you think about it, just 7 years ago, our three mobile devices were a basic cell phone, a BlackBerry, and a laptop. Now we've expanded this entire range. One of the more, and of course, tablets being one of the fastest growing elements of that at the moment. The interesting overlap there you see in the slide on the 10-inch tablet. Certainly, Apple moved into the 7-inch tablet business last year, but if you see the overlap in the operating systems, with 10-inch tablets now, we're getting those that run on traditional mobile operating systems, Android or iOS. But one of the areas we're looking at closely right now are Windows laptops, Windows tablets. You have the same engaging user experience, but a lot of serious users have been put off by the tablet because it's only good for a couple of things. You can read your email, you can surf the web, you can play media, but when it's time to do business, you're going back to the laptop. So Microsoft is certainly carving the way with the Surface Pro, but they're actually one of the leader ones getting into the market. Of course, if you advanced again, Eric, certainly, we are shifting to the post-PC era, as was named by Apple, and smartphones are exploding. In a recent survey we did with Information Week, we found out of the mobile devices being sold in the United States today, 54% of them are now smartphones. So smartphones have become the majority. Worldwide, it's about 44%. But we do expect to see an explosion in these worldwide. When you think about it, the U.S., and unfortunately our focus is all too often centered on the U.S., the U.S. is actually the third largest market for cell phones in the world. With about 328 million, there are over 1 billion cell phones in China and closing in on 900 million in India. So what we're really expecting to see the growth now is in low-end smartphones to serve those developing markets. Of course, when we look at the growth in the next slide, in worldwide device shipments, probably the most pronounced is the tablet market, as you might imagine. Actually, we're expecting a 400% increase. These projections come from Gartner between 2012 and 2015. At the same time, PCs, either desktops or notebooks, they're expecting to see those in the same time window drop about 20%. So clearly, we're moving on to a different set of platforms. And again, one of the key items or key themes that we see running through the mobility market has always been choice. And we're going to have plenty of choice and plenty of preference. If you look at the next slide.
Michael, sorry, question. What's ultra mobile?
Ultra mobile netbooks.
Oh, got it.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'd actually agree with the growth in those. So I think as much as the tablet will be dragging down the PC sales, I think it will be even a greater drag on the ultra mobile market, particularly the Windows-based tablets. Yep. So we'll see how that one plays out. But when you look at the preferred devices on the next slide for various applications, you notice all the check marks for the mobile device. This is clearly the thing that people want to be using. It has their directory, it gives access to email, text, and at least with larger screen devices, tablets rather than smartphones, video conferences and web conferences become much more of a reality. So on the mobile front, things are indeed moving, and the two themes are growth and choice, and we're seeing both of those played out in spades. I think you're going to have something to say about the cloud now, Hardy.
Yes. So if we could advance to slide 12, as I put forth earlier in the presentation, clearly this concept of hybrid it started to emerge in a big way last year, and it's this concept, as I mentioned, of leveraging on-premise IT investments with services from the cloud. If you move to the next slide, Michael, on 13, this is a survey that Michael's firm did in January of 2013, and I was struck by the significant growth not only in hybrid but also in cloud-based services, in the future. And perhaps you want to comment on that, Michael.
Absolutely. Well, we see it both in enterprise voice, but even more pronounced in unified communications. If you add the hybrid and the cloud-based percentages together, the anticipation, and basically what we asked of the survey respondents was, how is your UC and voice enterprise voice solutions met today, and how do you anticipate them changing in the future? So if you look at the cloud penetration for UC currently, it's 35%, but the future expectation was to double that to 70%.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, so it's definitely on everyone's radar.
Okay, the next slide, please, slide 14. This is, as I promised, we would give you an idea of what we think a potential hybrid UC stack might look for an enterprise. And this is based on a lot of experience with a lot of enterprise accounts that we've talked to. And there are certain applications, in many cases, what we're doing around, let's call it mission-critical voice applications, messaging and call processing, where there seems to be an interest to keep those applications on-prem behind the firewall. Of course, business process integration and some mobility capabilities and most likely presence from the desktop are all going to be behind the firewall or on-prem private cloud. And then what we're seeing is a lot of activity around adding call control, or actually moving call control to the cloud. Of course, email in the cloud with Office 365 and Gmail, collaboration capabilities, conferencing over the top type capabilities in contact center. And then if you wrap that with, of course, what Michael alluded to, which was interoperability being kind of the crux of this whole scenario, and of course a fixed mobile convergence type architecture for the applications on top of that. That's what it's probably going to look like for many of you. But again, how it looks for each individual enterprise is totally determined by your needs, your requirements. And I think Michael's got some real insight coming up here on some of the questions you need to ask relative to which pieces go where.
Yeah, if you look at the next slide, to cloud or not to cloud, we're getting an awful lot of inquiries from end-user clients today about how to approach the cloud decision. So we're starting to put together a basic model to help them through that transition. And the five considerations we came up with, number one is break down the pieces. That is, look at each individual UC component, call control, email, messaging, and the rest, and determine the strategic value to the organization. What makes your business run? Of course, confidentiality is going to be a concern in the cloud going forward. And probably one of the bigger inhibitors to more organizations moving to the cloud will be that concern of confidentiality. Reliability is manageable. Possibly not to the 5 nines level, but certainly with every one of the cloud solutions we're seeing today, branch survivability or independent survivability is going to be one of the key issues that we put on the table. Also staff. One of the big savings we find in the cloud-based deployment is to release our IT staff to work on more mission-critical operations and move that the telephonies and telephony-related specialties into a specialty area. And lastly, of course, the financial considerations, APEX or CAPEX or OPEX, which is going to be the best choice for the financial arrangements to that organization. So it's happening there. Those are some of the big things that we look at as we approach this with clients.
And I would second that. It's critical you do the economic analysis. You may decide to do it strategically for a non-economic reason, but I do believe, and we've had a lot of inquiry around ROI for cloud-based solutions. So that's an area where we're seeing a lot of our friends and competitors in the market working very hard to help you make decisions that make economic sense for your business. So moving on to the third key trend, context. And if we could jump to slide 17, this was coined by Gartner actually about 24 months ago, but information will be the oil of the 21st century. Of course, this is underlying or the foundational theme around big data or just large amounts of information, which the mobility trend is clearly accelerating the access to. And so, and it really is the holy grail from our perspective, which is to unify the concepts of communication with information from the enterprise to deliver a more real-time, more relevant experience for individuals, work groups, and enterprises in general. So moving on to slide 18, this is really where we see the world evolving to, which is this concept of contextually-aware UC. And what I mean by that is that instead of just a simple, for example, a call routing where it just goes through a PBX and then directly to an extension, we've got additional elements from the environment, for example, where you are, what's on your calendar, your presence, proximity, whether you're on the phone or off the phone, and then possibly information that may be valuable to you when the call is served up or when the information is disseminated to you that would make your decision-making process and or your work more efficient. And so this is the concept around context that makes it so valuable. And as we take you through where we think the world's going, where we're heading from a product strategy standpoint, I think you'll see immediately why this makes sense. Michael, did you want to add a comment on this one?
Yeah, certainly we're seeing a lot of interesting developments in terms of context. The ability to group all of your communications, text, email, voice messages, meetings, with specific people is one element of that. But the part I see that's been overlooked for the most part in UC has been the context of location.
Right.
And bringing that into the picture, we found enormous value in countless mobile applications by tapping into location. So it's nice to see that finally location is making it onto the list.
Yep. And if you want to jump, agreed, 100%. And if you jump to slide 19, please, this gives you kind of a concept. In fact, we're seeing this deployed with enterprises today, where what used to be a very discrete activity without any context is now contextually aware, where a sales guy perhaps arrives at a location. He immediately, based on his location, is loaded with specific information relative to that location. He can take or make decisions based on that, and then the system's updated to reflect his change in location on the way out the door, as well as update the database for whatever information he's gathering and or he or she is gathering and or inputting. And we've got multiple examples of this being done today in a perhaps not quite as a contextually aware example, but what we're seeing is the demand and the interest from customers to add location-based, as Michael alluded to, location-based information to drive and speed business processes even further. Michael, did you want to add any comment on that?
Yeah, and certainly we've seen this sweeping through the consumer space in mobility, particularly with things like augmented reality. But I think now as we start talking about Siri for the enterprise, it's key to be focusing on what core ideas out of technologies like Siri are really appropriate for a business application. So I think we're in the same direction here.
That's great. So let's move on to slide 20, which sets the stage, obviously, for the conversation around where is Siri for the enterprise, the theme of our webinar. And so if you could jump to slide 21, you know, really, this is a conversation we've been having for many, many years. AVST, as a manufacturer in the unified communication space, has, of course, been delivering, you know, unified messaging and personal assistant and things like that. But sort of all these emerging trends around mobility and context have sort of crystallized a new conversation. And the conversation went something like, okay, if the consumer has this intelligent personal assistant, what would it look like for an enterprise? And if we were going to create that kind of concept, what would be the inputs to it and what would be the output from it? So that's the conversation we've had. If you flip to slide 22, clearly we're taking into consideration these three key trends that we just talked about, which is obviously the mega trend of mobility, this emergence of on-demand services, and speed to market, if you will, around the cloud, and then of course very critically the concept of context, which we think is really one of the game changers here.
Yeah, and moving into the enterprise space really does change the conversation. Mobile in the consumer space is fun and engaging, but in business we have to be talking about productivity. It's either getting more done in less time, or more particularly with mobility, what we're finding is getting things done when you have the time.
That's
so
right.
Making use of every minute you have.
That's
and of
right.
course, accessibility, productivity, and connectedness are all part of that picture.
That's exactly right. And if you jump to slide 23, so there's Phil Edham's done a nice analysis on this on different types of workers, and the key to this is sort of dividing your workforce into, in the case of Phil's methodology, three different elements. And what we're focused on today is really around knowledge workers, who tend to have unstructured processes, personal workflow, et cetera. And this is engineers, executives, salespersons, and managers, where we see this concept of a personal assistant being, or a contextually aware personal assistant being of such great value. That's not to say that the context, context is not relevant or valuable to task workers or service workers, information workers or service workers, but for purposes of what we're talking about today, we're focused specifically on this really high value added element of the workforce. So on slide 24, for a knowledge worker, work is an activity, not a location. There may be in various locations, or if you will, usage scenarios on slide 25. These are four typical usage scenarios for a knowledge worker, working at their desk, from the car, being in a meeting, or working remotely from some location like a hotel. If you jump to slide 26, what I'm going to take you through just quickly is a kind of a different example of a different element of unified communications capabilities that are valuable to you. So, for example, at your desk, having the ability to access your messages in a unified messaging format from the desktop and or be able to click the call is of immense value. And if you noticed on that one chart that Michael presented from his survey with Information Week, the one application that people said that they like to use at their desk was unified messaging, which kind of validates the whole concept of the usage scenario here. Moving on to slide 27, in the car, of course, this is an environment where hands-free speech access would be immensely valuable. And as Michael said, not to just freeform, but to do specific tasks associated with increasing your productivity. For example, accessing messages, making outbound calls, taking calls, replying to emails, perhaps, and managing your calendar, things like that.
That was what I was thinking of specifically when I said doing it when you have the time.
That's right. That's exactly right. And safely, or more safely, as the case may be. Slide 28, in a meeting, this is an experience that all knowledge workers have, which is, they don't want to take a call in the middle of a meeting for multiple reasons, not the least of which they probably don't want to be rude. But there are, how powerful would it be if you could actually be doing tasks and or routing calls to people where a customer could get service more quickly. So one of the elements we think is quite interesting here is what we call silent call screening and routing, and it's the ability via a mobile client to see your calls and then be able to route them without interrupting a meeting or being disruptive in a meeting. And then from a hotel, of course, what you really want is you want your calls to go to the hotel. I mean, how many times, when was the last time somebody called you at the hotel? They'll either call you at your office and they miss you, or they call you on your cell phone, and that may or may not work based on where you're relative to connection and reception signal. So in this area, the perfect world, what you'd be able to do is to turn your soft phone into an extension, a virtual extension, and be taking calls as if you were sitting at your desk. And again, we think this is a very powerful part of the subset of the solutions.
Yeah, actually, in the mobile space, we started moving that direction early on. So some of the first big applications I worked with smartphone clients were for people traveling internationally.
Yep.
Who could possibly run up $1,000 a week cell phone bill.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Get on a hotel DSL, and it's funny. I remember talking to some of the early adopters. When it starts, it's a little weird. They said, but after you use it for a week or so, it becomes the most natural thing in the world. So.
Yep. I would say, having recently just been at several of the major trade shows, including Enterprise Connect, the headsets have become just fantastic. The stuff from Plantronics and some of the other competitors is just great technology today. So it's not an uncomfortable experience to be using a soft phone with a headset these days. So this is just a kind of how we've seen the evolution. To Michael's point, if you guys, for many of you that remember, and of course we've been doing it for 3 decades. So, the sort of the start of this significant productivity transformation on the communication side was all around, the invention of call processing and voicemail. And then that moved into this concept of unified messaging, which is, I believe, number 2, Michael, on the survey of what people are looking to deploy in the near term for UC, per your survey in January.
Yep.
Moving into this concept of a speech-enabled personal assistant, which, of course, is, includes the subset of UM and the other elements. And then now taking that beyond just this concept of a speech-enabled personal assistant. Speech is an element, but it's even more powerful than that. That's this concept of a contextually-aware personal assistant, which is really, if you will, Siri for the enterprise. Next slide. So we took that as a company, and we took all the elements that we thought would be critical in that scenario, and we created this new, what we're calling Next Generation Total Office Manager, or ATOM, which stands for AVST, Total Office Manager, and integrated all these elements that we've been talking about to create this solution. And so it includes unified messaging. It has speech if you want it. It has this concept of personal assistant, contextually aware, a mobile UC interface, of course, which is critical, multilingual, so we can support our various customers globally, secure access to corporate data, recognizing the confidentiality, and then, of course, segments personal and professional workflows, which I'm sure Michael would agree, this separation of personal and professional workflows is critical in the context of BYOD.
Absolutely, and what I'm encouraged about with ATOM is it doesn't fit the same model as a traditional mobile UC client. Those traditional mobile UC clients had fairly poor user adoption because they took the user out of their normal calling pattern and made them do something different. And for short text, it just wasn't worth the effort. With ATOM, the work model seems to be a much longer session, during which the knowledge worker can get the email, get the messages, make calls, calendar entries. So it's not just a quick in and out like we see with many mobile applications. It's really a longer-term session that really does make the tool worth the effort.
I would agree, and our focus, and I would make this as a sort of a generic comment, not AVST centric, which is that we're in different modes. We communicate in different methods, as I gave you the 4 different usage scenarios. Speech, as an element of that, is very powerful in certain environments. It may not be necessary in other environments. To Michael's point about whatever the natural experience is for you, whether it's at your desk, on your desktop, it's on your mobile phone, while you're in your car, speech-based, whatever. That's what we think that the solution needs to have those capabilities. So just kind of quickly, slide 33. These, again, take out ATOM for a second and insert, contextually aware personal assistant for the enterprise. It goes mobile when you do. It delivers information to you wherever you are securely on the mobile interface that is the most relevant to probably your current experience. It knows your location, slide 34. And it routes your calls and your information to the optimal device based on where you are. Slide 35, it will tell people your current status more intelligently, so it's synced with your calendar and presence to notify of current status, and then based on that status, as it becomes more intelligent, it can do all sorts of things relative to routing. You may have prioritized call flow, things like that, information flow, things like that. And then slide 36, as we said, we consider speech a critical element of any solution in this space, and again, it's a subset of what a consumer version would do, frankly, because you don't need it to do all those things. You're not looking for pizza.
Yeah, but basically it's Siri with a focus on productivity.
That's right. And then if you want to move on to slide 37, which I think is kind of where we, and you already sort of stole my thunder on this, Michael, but that's fine, is really, again, not only are people asking us where we are today and kind of what's in the next 12 months and what are we thinking, but they're also asking us what are we thinking 12, 24, 36 months out. And, I think a couple of comments for you on that. Number one, this concept of context is just emerging, and it's going to just accelerate. And you can see it in some of the companies going public, and really just the whole acceleration of information flow and location and whatnot on the mobile devices. Cloud. You saw the survey data on that. Either cloud-based or hybrid, private and public cloud-based solutions are clearly going to become the dominant majority of unified communications and voice solutions sometime out. Michael, I'm assuming that's probably a 5-year window in the future. So that's a very critical trend that you need to think about. And of course, mobility is the mega trend we talked about. The one we haven't talked about, although Michael brought it up briefly, was social, and how is that going to plug into this? And this is an area we're putting a lot of focus into now. As you all know, there's a lot of intersections of companies that are socially based that are now sort of moving into the unified communication space, and Microsoft buying Yammer, of course Facebook, as big as they are or whatnot. There's a lot going on in that area, and for our children, for the 20-something generation, the millennials, the social interface is really where they, in many cases reside, and so it's imperative on us to take that and incorporate that into this concept of enterprise personal assistant, and clearly that's going to be an element of the solution set.
Absolutely, and I see a real shift in the tools and work models we're going to be using moving forward. Basically, a real move away from the traditional email paradigm into a social paradigm. We'll live in the social, in the collaborative workspace, and the context basically is built into the information that we store. So I think we're going in the same direction there.
So mobile, social, interface, contextually aware, and delivered by the cloud. Is that a fair way to say it, Michael?
Yeah, good.
Great. Eric, I think that's a wrap.
All right. Well,
just slide 38 was one other, I guess I should just mention this one final comment, which is Michael's done a real nice white paper called The CIO's Guide to Enterprise Mobility, which is a thank you giveaway or leave behind for you for attending our webinar, and the AVST team will make sure that you get that, Eric, and I will turn it over to you for questions.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot, Hardy and Michael, and we'll leave that up on the screen so you know what you're looking for. We got a bunch of great questions coming in. I want to start with a question that always comes up when you look at some of these productivity tools. Somebody's asking, how do you present, and I'd even take a step back and say, how do you determine ROI when you're thinking about a tool like this to pitch it to your CFO or whoever?
Michael, do you want to take a first shot at that?
Well, it's certainly it's soft dollar savings, so it's hard to pin it down. However, in the greater scheme of things, we don't cost justify telephones or copiers or PCs or a lot of other things that we have in the business. So in part, I think it's going to have to be a leap of faith. But given the experience people are having with these speech-enabled tools like Siri in the consumer lives, I think they'll be able to bridge the gap to see how we can how it does make people more productive in business as well. What would you say, Artie?
Well, I would also concur that we're kind of on the front end of this, so it's pretty early. And I do believe, based on the question, I've had this question many times recently, because there's a lot of interest around this stuff, and people want to buy it. So the simple answer is, the more we can tie it into business process, the harder the ROI is going to get. So if you take Michael's point, which is, for example, unified messaging, anyone that's ever used unified messaging would tell you that it's a significant productivity enhancer. However, it's to try to figure out, how to demonstrate that to somebody on, did it take you less, seconds less or not? You could do time studies. We have done them in the past, and that's one way to do it. But the reality of it is, if we can tie some of this technology into a business process, you immediately have more of a contact center-like scenario where you can measure changes in productivity, throughput, things like that, and clearly that can generate an ROI. So I would agree with Michael. It's important, and for many of you who don't know this, and this is not so much an AVST plug as it is an industry plug. A lot of these capabilities can be added to your core, whatever technology you have, or if they're not, it's something you should be pressing your vendors to do, because you've all made huge investments in your infrastructure, and that's not going to change. And so the concept of having to refresh everything you have to get some of this is, frankly, we don't view that as a real scenario for an enterprise. So what we want to be able to do is add this incrementally, and what we've seen is customers who buy this, and again, stay focused on an element of your workforce, like knowledge workers, pick a subset and deploy it and get going, and it's going to be a nominal investment, and I believe you'll get immediate feedback from the knowledge workers that say this is exactly what we needed.
So is this, and just to clarify, this completely, I don't want to say replaces, but if you're using Atom, if you're also, say, the thing on everybody's mind these days is Link. If you're, Link Microsoft just announced Link on, Android and iPhone. If you're using Atom, you don't need the Link client or any other, whoever your UC vendor is, client?
It just depends on the environment. I mean, what we really see typically is Link is deployed on the desktop, and what you need is a different solution to handle, as Michael said, the various, call flows and usage scenarios. So Link can become your soft phone, obviously. So for in the hotel scenarios we talked about, it's clearly your soft phone. It's your presence engine. So think of a personal assistant, or a contextually-aware personal assistant, taking information from Link and enhancing an experience. So I would tell you probably you'd end up with at least a Link-like client, which you can consider a soft phone or your presence engine, and then a contextually-aware UC application.
Any thoughts on that?
No, I agree. I agree completely.
Okay. And we have a question: is Atom available in the market today, or what's the rollout schedule if that's still in the offing?
Well, that's a great question. So we're releasing with our version 8.5, which is coming out in Q3.
Okay.
Early Q3, I should say.
Okay. And somebody wants, the same person wants just a little clarification. What's the difference between Siri and Atom? Can you list the difference or explain it?
Yeah, well, just to keep it simple, Siri is first of all, it's a speech-based solution. So, and the concept of a contextually-aware personal assistant, it does a lot of things that have nothing to do with speech. For example, based on your location, it could change the routing of your calls, okay, which would never have anything to do with a speech. So think of Siri as a speech-based, portal, if you will, into an unlimited amount of information. That is the entire internet. And as I think Michael mentioned, or maybe you mentioned, it was natural language. It's been completely optimized for that type of scenario. On the enterprise side, it's much more narrowly focused, and it's focused on the typical tasks or processes that a knowledge worker, and moving down into the information worker element of the workforce, is going to need to do. And so that, as I said, and optimizing their information flow. So it's much narrower subset of capabilities in the sense of you're not looking for it to do everything. It's more enterprise centric, and I would say more process centric is a better way to say it.
And when you're looking for mobile application, that's what you try to do. Don't do everything, do a few things well. So I think you're right on the mark there, Hardy.
Okay. We have a question about, and it's maybe a little more remote, but it's something that enterprises are wrestling with too, which is video, and SIP video is starting to entering the enterprise more, and mobile video being a hot thing. What role would video play in this product, if not kind of in the early releases? At least, what could you do with it? What are some potential applications?
Well, I would argue that video certainly would be an element of its capabilities moving forward. So, that's my simple answer, I guess. But again, if you go back to, and that would be specifically around potentially some sort of communication completion. In other words, if you're calling me on via video and want to speak to me, you don't want to be, videoing me on my desk when I'm sitting at home on my iPad. So things like that. So there's some of that sort of intelligent routing to make sure you're getting the communication stream is being routed to the right location is the point. But I would say it's a little early for us in that context, and we're, no pun intended again. But Michael, did you have anything else you want to add on that?
That and just the appropriateness of the device. I've had experience trying to do video on an iPhone. You really do need a little more real estate. So it's the context, location, and the device. I think are going to be the three key elements that we have to bring together.
I have a quick example of that, just as a comment. I was driving through the Starbucks drive-through today, and they have a very nice new drive-through portal which has the person looking at me, via video, and I assume she or he could see me as well. And I thought about this myself, and I said that's really cool, but I'm not sure that it matters. Okay, so so anyway.
Just in terms of thinking about the whole, maybe the broader concept of context, the idea that a particular user's video capabilities or their codec or their client or whatever they may have you would think would factor into the whole notion of the context that the system is trying to figure out as it's establishing a communication session with that person. Is this person in an optimal state to use video right now?
Exactly. Exactly. And that's exactly right. Which is all around, what we're doing with Presence today. We'll be doing interoperability for video, relatively soon, I would guess.
And I want to remind everybody, a couple of minutes ago as we were chatting, I also pushed out a survey that we ask everybody to fill out to just help us try and continue to improve these webinars and give us your feedback. We have a question, and this is definitely one of the hot areas in mobile and in call centers. Someone's asking how do you see Atom supporting mobile self-service applications for customer assistance?
So I personally, well, first of all, think of it from a knowledge worker standpoint. The next iteration of Atom is going to be even more tightly integrating, some sort of information flow of the enterprise. So, for example, a sales guy through the Atom interface could, as I said, self-service access, information, process things, do things like that. As far as an end user goes, I'm not sure that that Atom itself is the interface, but what I do think is a contextually-aware interface, similar to what you have with contact centers today, where they know based on your phone number and your location, perhaps who you talk to or who you should talk to, or what information you need or whatever. So the thing I think is evolving quickly is this concept of dual mode speech and touch tone in the context of a call, and multilingual. And both of those are really areas where we're having a lot of conversations with customers on, is how do we make the experience the right experience, to your point, in the right environment. So if the customer is calling from an airport, you really don't want to be dealing with a speech interface. You want to be, you want the system to detect, the environment you're in and allow you to do your business in the most efficient manner.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing a lot of interesting developments from the contact center world as well, with regard to end-user service, virtual queues, systems that will allow you to build a customer service connection capability directly into a mobile application. So there's a lot of work on that front.
I've seen it. One of the comments I've seen it recently in the banking context on the enterprise side, where they've again. Michael's point, simplicity being the prime directive, they've issued a mobile app which allows you to do a very, very narrow subset of what you would have done, in a traditional internet and or telecom a call you can do on a mobile app. So it's a subset of that, and very powerful.
And here's a question: What controls will contact recipients have for the notifications if they're using Atom?
So there will be a significant amount of control. So in other words, I assume the question is, can I get notified by text? Can I get notified by email or whatever? All that, essentially, I don't want to be too generic, but all that type of capability, we view that as being configurable. Now, that being said, our experience, again, and I'm sure many of the listeners would agree with this, is that, a lot of people set things up and just never change it. So there is a subset, very narrow subset of the workforce that will change things on a real-time basis, but for the most part, what people want is they want it just to work well, and they don't have to change it. So, but I do agree with the question, which is, SMS or SMTP notification of information, and as a result of a process, is very, very powerful, and that's something that absolutely we can do.
And that's also one of the key capabilities with location. If people don't change their present status or depend solely on calendar entries, your present status might be wrong 50% of the time.
That's exactly
location
right.
is a real powerful and automatic way of adding more information about what you need to know about that correspondent.
Yeah, let me add a comment. That's exactly right. And one of the things we've been able to do in our, let's call it, personal assistant capabilities was, you could set up your calendar based on your routing and things like that, and on the fly via either the internet or via speech or via mobile app, you could change that on the fly. But the truth is, you get your schedule set up on Monday. You leave for the airport. Eric, I'm sure you do this a lot, and you forget. Okay, so you don't, and then all of a sudden, you're getting messages, and your calls aren't getting routed to you as efficiently. What Michael's alluding to is with this concept of contextually aware, which is in our 8.5 Atom, basically the system just changes. It overrides whatever your key schedule is or your master schedule is, and based on your location. And if it says your schedule says you're supposed to be in the office, but the system's telling me based on your location that you're not, I'm going to route the calls to the right device in real time, and that's really powerful and very simple, but very powerful, because most guys like me and most people, most knowledge workers just don't want to have to screw around with that stuff.
Yep.
Well, one thing that occurs to me, and I don't have a clue about it, maybe you guys don't either, maybe it's not an issue, but is this, you mentioned, China and India as markets, and thinking about kind of the closest markets in North America, in affinity and, similarity is Europe, but there's, in when you get into things, issues of the cloud and where data is stored, you get into a lot of regulation and a lot of stuff that employers can't do to their employees in Europe that are tighter than here. Are you aware of any issues around location services that have that kind of a bent to them, where your employer in Europe, say, maybe is more restricted in where they can track you or where they can know you are or something like that?
I'm just going to say yes, just because I'm sure the answer is yes. But I do agree with you that, and this is actually one of the reasons why we do, we see a lot of different architectures for deployment of technology in Europe, because, to your point, depending on the customer and their footprint, they may want to have stuff centralized, they may want to have it distributed, they may want messages to, not be put into email, et cetera, et cetera. So to your point, I believe, again, my advice would be just make sure that you're clear on, what you can and cannot do before you get into it. But clearly that is certainly a challenge that, that's why the hybrid is so powerful, because, you may be able to deliver call control, call control from the cloud, but you may want certain data and messaging and things like that all stored on-prem in the country of choice, whatever that is. And so that's where it really becomes powerful.
Yeah, the only comment I have to add to that is we have found that it is against the law in a few countries, two in Europe, as I recall, to remotely wipe an employee's phone. But we haven't. I mean, all of this is still relatively new, so the body of law surrounding it really hasn't matured to a great degree yet. But in terms of overall sensitivity, the issues dealing with employee rights and the like, Europe does seem to be much more attuned and much more aggressive about that than we are here.
Well, Eric, can I make one more comment on video, just for a second? Because I was thinking about it as you were talking. One other interesting application that we've seen relative to video, and clearly fits into this sort of the Atom paradigm, is this concept of, and you know, today in many organizations, CEOs have messages that they record and distribute messages to their workers, and so and that typically is a voice message, and it's distributed. Just depending, it could be through UM, it could be through voice messaging, you know, that kind of scenario. One of the scenarios I see with Atom that is really going to be a great use of video is this ability for a CEO, as an example, or an executive or a knowledge worker, to record some sort of message and then transmit that in real time to somebody. And so that's where I do see the ability of video, or so I say the integration of video into the Atom, you know, capability set to be very powerful.
All right, and that pretty much takes us just about to the top of the hour. I want to remind everyone that here's some information on AVST, and I'll push out just one more time the slide to remind you to look for this white paper that Michael's done. It'll be a great additional resource for you. And I want to thank everybody for attending the webinar. Again, this was Where is Siri for the Enterprise, brought to you by Enterprise Connect, AVST, and United Business Media. Shortly after the event, we'll send you an email reminder to give you a link to access the presentation on demand, and we'll ask you if you know anybody who you think might get something out of this too that didn't sign up. Please pass that along to them as well. This webinar is copyright 2013 by United Business Media. The presentation materials are owned by, or copyright if that's the case, by Enterprise Connect and AVST, who are solely responsible for its content, and the individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. On behalf of our guests, Michael Finneran, Principal of DBRN Associates, and Hardy Myers, President and CEO of AVST, thanks for your time and have a great day.